Hi, I'm Chap Bettis, author of The Disciple Making Parent, and this is my audio blog, where I read some of my blog posts in audio format for your convenience. In today's episode, we're continuing with part 2 of my reading of what I think is one of the most important posts that I put up, Emotional Blackmail and Self-Absorption. I felt burdened to write it because I came across some information that had put words to an experience that I had had in ministry. And then I came across 3 other leaders who essentially said the same thing in different words. And it helped formulate and helped me understand what I was experiencing as I was trying to minister to others. Well, in the last post, we started and we got about halfway through, but now let's continue on. Tim Keller goes the deepest into this issue when dealing with self-centeredness in marriage. But his comments in the meaning of marriage could be applied to all wounded people. Tim Keller says this: there are many reasons that we cannot see our own self-centeredness. One of the main factors that hides it from us is our own history of mistreatment. Many people come to marriage having been seriously hurt by parents or lovers or former spouses. And when the inevitable conflicts occur, our memories can sabotage us. They can prevent us from doing the normal day-to-day work of repentance and forgiveness and extending grace that is so crucial to making progress in our marriages. The reason is that our woundedness makes us self-absorbed. And that's not hard to see in others, of course. When you begin talking to wounded people, it's not long before they begin talking about themselves. They're so engrossed with their own pain and problems that they don't realize what they look like. When you point out selfish behavior to a wounded person, he or she will say, well, maybe so, but you don't understand what it's like. Well, the wounds, in their mind, justify the behavior. The Christian approach begins with a different analysis of the situation. We believe that, as badly wounded as persons may be, the resulting self-absorption of the human heart was not caused by the mistreatment. It was only magnified and shaped by it. Their mistreatment poured gasoline on the fire, and the flame and the smoke now choked them. But their self-centeredness already existed prior to their woundedness. That's not to say that wounded people don't need great gentleness, tender treatment, affirmation, and patience. It's just to say that this is not the whole story. So Keller counsels dealing gently with affirmation, all the while helping people understand that there's more to the story. The self-absorption is preventing the repentance and forgiveness that's so crucial to healthy relationships. Dave Harvey, in Letting Go, Rugged Love for Wayward Souls, describes the same phenomenon in prodigals, those actively walking away from the faith and relationships. Harvey writes of 4 different characteristics: personal irresponsibility to appropriate roles in relationships. Second, victim-centeredness. Third, a declaration of independence from any commitments. And fourth, the threat of flight or leaving the relationship. But it's the victim-centeredness that is of importance to us for this blog post. Harvey writes, they seemed blind and unaware or unconcerned about the pain that they were causing others. This selfishness was rooted in a story, a narrative that they told over and over again where they were the victim, the one who had been hurt. The sisters realized that something truly destructive had taken root. With their loss of personal responsibility, both loved ones had become consummate victims. The story they told themselves and other people was about how they had been sinned against, how they were the victims of injustice. They had not been loved. They had not been cared for. Their concerns had been ignored. They twisted any attempt to speak truth and used it as further evidence of how misunderstood they were. Well, the purpose of this blog post is not at all to discount the real mistreatment at the hands of others, but it is to warn that caring for the wounded requires unpacking how self-centeredness distorts self-perception. And it is to warn those tender-hearted individuals within the church of this danger. Well, let's talk about practical applications. All four of these pastors observed this phenomenon in different contexts and state it in different ways. Yet all are describing a common virus that has numerous manifestations. If these things are true, what are some action points for pastors and parents? Well, let me suggest several. Number one, create private awareness. The church needs to weep with those who weep, but with discernment. As a leader understands this dynamic, he will be more aware of what is happening and speak into it. Both the helper and the hurting need to understand the subtle self-absorption that can occur. Whether in a leadership meeting, marriage counseling, or receiving a hurting person, a shepherd will have awareness of situations that can occur. So 1, create private awareness. 2, create public awareness through proclamation and inoculation. The church needs to set a contrast between the world's woundedness wild card and truthful care. Just as important as private conversations are helping the whole church understand this dynamic. A pastor can speak encouraging words from the pulpit, and these instructions set the tone of the church culture. So my second suggestion is to create public awareness through proclamation and inoculation. Number 3, use the concept of self-absorption. There are many biblical words that just slide over our conscience because they're not in our everyday language. Me? I'd never qualify as a person who's a, quote, lover of themselves, 2 Timothy 3:2. That's someone else. But being self-absorbed resonates with the current language and is certainly biblical. Given the understanding of sin as causing us to curve in on ourselves, church and family leaders need to introduce that terminology. And we can introduce the opposite concept of self-forgetfulness. Tim Keller's little book by the same name is helpful with this subject. The gospel should move people from self-absorption to self-forgetfulness. So number 3, use the concept of self-absorption. And number 4, warn the tender-hearted. We all see the world through our personality. Those gifted in mercy will be drawn to the hurting, but they cannot nor should not let the wounds overpower truth and turn them away from God. I've seen this manifest itself in 2 ways. In one church in the area, I saw tender-hearted people start a ministry to help a self-absorbed person who was supposed to have cancer. I say supposedly because the symptoms never appeared and no one could talk with her doctor. But the tender-hearted had started a campaign to help her that had the momentum of a locomotive. In addition, I've watched some young people who've grown up in a believing and loving church turn their back on the faith. One common thread in many of these cases was a tender heart. This caring individual was willing to be taken in by the stories of suffering, especially by suffering at the hands of Christians. These victims have responded to their mistreatment, whether real or imagined, with bitterness. But their self-absorbed response has also attracted and deceived others who were tender-hearted. As a result, these secondary parties drift away and align themselves in solidarity with the victims, even though they have not experienced any of what the primary victim is claiming. They rightly desire to help true victims, but they're naive to the power and deceiving nature, quote-unquote, victims present. In self-righteousness, these advocates turn their back on the hope for victims, the gospel. Youth leaders and parents need to warn of this temptation and trap. Well, our country is awash in an ocean of victimhood. As long as there is sin, there will be wounds, and the church can and should care for wounded people. But a good desire to help the hurting can morph into empowering the self-absorbed. This is a subtle temptation in the church. Awareness and education are the key. As the Spirit of God works in a person, they move from self-absorption to self-forgetfulness, from ashes to beauty, from mourning to joy, to become an oak of righteousness that glorifies the Lord. Thank you for listening to the Disciple Making Parent audio blog. Visit our website to find more resources for the family at thedisciplemakingparent.com. If you enjoyed this episode and believe it is as important as I do then please consider telling someone else about this show in part 1. And also, please leave us a rating or review. Believe it or not, both of those small things help out a lot. They help others find us. Thanks for listening.